Hello there, I'm Sandy Allnock, and today I want to show you some very, very different looks you can get from the chisel nibs of your alcohol markers. All three of these were colored with the chisel nib, which is the most ignored nib out there in alcohol marker land. So let's change that, shall we? I recently purchased the Oahu set from Ohuhu, and I've promised myself I'm not going to say Ohuhu Oahu any more than I have to because it's a tongue twister. But the chisel nibs are on one end and the bullet nibs are on the other, and the chisel nib is one that we avoid. But if you look at it, there's like a million different angles. The angles have angles, and each one of those will give you a different amount of nib that's touching the paper. When your nibs are as juicy as a fresh batch of Oahu markers or the Honolulus or Copics or anything, any brand new marker that's fully juiced, you're not going to get much skipping. And if you're getting skipping, it means your nib is on the way out. So you might need to do a little repair to them if you can, or refill your markers, that sort of thing. But these are going to be super juicy, and they're going to be a little overly juicy. It's one of the things that I don't like very much about the Ohuhu markers is that it's the way they pour ink out on the paper. And sometimes that just gets to be over much, and then you end up with a bunch of bleeding because it's just gushing out of the pens. And there doesn't seem to be any moderating it, even when they're not super full. They seem to do that. It's just in the nature of these particular pens. So I'm laying down the color using the chisel nib and covering a lot of real estate. I'm leaving just the whites empty so that I can color over any of those parts with darker colors. But if I start with the lightest, then I can just kind of set where my lighting is. My light is coming from the upper left, so I've left some white highlights on some of those panels of the robot's head. And then I'm going to start going in with my darkest color, well, my second darkest, we shall say. And I'm going to put in some shadows in the very darkest areas, anywhere there's a hole in the metal or a piece of metal that's kind of raised up off the surface, that kind of thing. And this, by the way, is a quick sketch I did of a printable that I have on my website, and it was a fundraiser last month, 100% fundraiser for the International Child Art Foundation. And it's set up as bookmarks, so it's not just the head, it's like the robot, and he's holding books and stuff. And there's 4 of them in the set. So if you like to color robots, you could pick that up and make some bookmarks and read about the bookmarks campaign that we're running. That's linked in the doobly-doo, as well as the robots. But this continues to be a partial fundraiser. It's no longer a 100% fundraiser. Just do that 100% during July, because it's World Watercolor Month. Anyway, you can pick that up if you would like to color him. So you can see I'm adding in all of these darks in the picture, and then I switch to a mid-tone marker, and I can start again covering a lot of real estate quickly and doing that with the chisel nib. And while you may not enjoy coloring with a chisel nib on the regular, it's going to preserve your nibs longer, your brush nibs. And these are Oahu, so they don't have a brush nib, but if you use your chisel nib when you're covering massive real estate like this, your nibs are not going to go squishy on you so fast. And I hadn't really thought about that until almost immediately my Honolulu markers, my brush nib markers. The nibs are all pretty much useless. There's not much I can do with them now because they're so soft and floppy. If I had done this, if I had thought to use the chisel nib when I was covering big real estate, that would have been a smarter idea, because those nibs just aren't made to last. Now, you might be somebody who loves a squishy nib. That's great. These are the perfect markers for you if so. But these particular ones that I'm using here, the Oahu markers, don't have a brush nib, so there's no worry about that. But since I bought them, I figured I would use them for some art before I donate them out, because I'm going to be giving them to a local arts organization that does some programs with kids. So I think that'll be a great donation for them. So here I'm adding in more details in my very, very darkest. And you can see it kind of feels a little bit like C-3PO, which was my goal in coloring him in all of these gold colors. And you can, of course, color him all different kinds of metal. I almost want to try him in something kind of rusty. So perhaps if you watch my social media, maybe you'll see me coloring him as a rusty colored robot. Then this one is another printable, and it was also a fundraiser for the International Child Art Foundation. Again, it's a partial fundraiser the rest of the year. And I thought I'd do something that's completely the opposite, because you can kind of see on a robot making big fat marker strokes is helpful because you're just making big shapes, and simplifying them makes it look more metallic. But how do you do fur? And you can do fur in the same way you do with a brush nib, believe it or not. You can still do a little bit of kind of flicking, just with the ends of the marker, lift up as you get to the end of it. So I'm layering on colors and getting a little bit darker over time, but as I start getting into the darker markers where you can see more of the color, I'm just adding in a little kind of twist at the end of the stroke, or a little flick, and it feels a little bit like soft fur. Now these meerkats are a mix of colors, so they're a little hard to color anyway. They have grays, they have kind of a goldish color, they have some browns, some blacks around the eyes and the ears. So I'm building up to the darks with all these other colors, and I'm just taking different light browns and light grays and little by little adding a little bit of darkness to them, and trying to figure out, just from a random picture I found of a meerkat, like where would the color go? Where are they white? And they're mostly white around the outside edges. It's the way that their fur is. But if you look at them straight on, they don't look like a white animal. So I didn't want him to be white. I wanted to have enough color in here so that he would actually look like a meerkat. And so I started adding in more grays on top of the browns. So if it got too brown, too goldish, then putting the grays on top of that, adding more value little by little. It's kind of the opposite of the metallic, where I went right for the darks as soon as I put down my lightest color. So I could start to build back toward the lights. With an animal like this, I didn't want to go too far with it until I had some clue where I was headed. So then I got out a dark gray marker to put the spots around the eyes and to put in the hat, and decided I would do the brushes at the same time while I had the marker in my hand. And just, start looking at, okay, now what does it look like when I have all this fur next to these very, very dark places? And I decided I needed a little more under the chinny chin. And then I added in the dark ears, and the spots and the ears and stuff can kind of look blackish, but I didn't want to go all the way for black until I was sure that I might need that. So I decided to just keep going with dark grays. I put some more of that dark gray underneath of the arm so it would look shaded. And then I'm using a gray that's, a little bit lighter than that one that I had just used, because that felt really powerful. And I'm using a lighter color to just kind of start smoothing some of this out and letting it blend in. All this again done with the chisel nib. You don't need to use the brush nib all the time. So you may want to play with your chisel nibs and see if there are effects you can get with them, and just play on scrap paper and just make some marks and see if you can get some fur, see if you can get trees to work, different kind of things you normally would color in your brush markers, and see if your chisels can do that. Because if you can save it for those moments when you normally would use the brush nib but don't necessarily need to, then you're going to save your brush nibs so they last longer. So I put darker and darker colors in the ears and the eyes, and then ended up using a white acrylic pen, a Copic acrylic pen, to put in the dots for the highlights on the eyes. And then I'll use a couple of different purples for the backpack. Now this idea for this drawing, and it In the printable of this one, you get the full meerkat. You get his legs and everything. He's standing on a little pile of rocks. And the idea came from a watercolor bookmark that I did of him. And it was just so much fun. When I ended up adding in the color for the backpack, I actually did it in rainbow colors. And it looked so cute. Little artist meerkat. So as I said, both of these images, they're the full images. These are just sketches I did from them so I could do some coloring on them. Both of them are partial fundraisers. A percentage gets donated to the International Child Art Foundation. And we will be talking more about that as the 25-26 year goes on, because I'm going to be teaching at their big event next year. Before we get to the coral, let's do a quick commercial break. And this one is due to YouTube. It doesn't like me posting long videos. So this is a drawing that was going to be here, but it took me long enough that I decided I would make a snack class out of it instead. And a snack class is an inexpensive class. And when we are in tariff and inflation season, who doesn't need a break on price? I think that would be a good thing. So you might be seeing more snack classes coming from me to help you out. So you can learn something for just a couple of bucks instead of paying for a full class. It will be real-time video, narrated, and you'll get the drawing. So you won't have to draw it. You can just print it out and do the coloring and learn about different ways you can use the chisel nib in your artwork. And these are all things I was trying to think of, stuff that crafters would end up probably needing to draw or color at some point. So hopefully this helps to do trees and bricks and buildings and flower boxes and cars and all sorts of fun things. So link in the doobly-doo to the Chisel Marker Techniques class, just a couple of bucks. Now let's look at the coral colony, and I'll tell you some things you want to avoid when you're using your chisel nib. And one of them is avoid really small images and small areas. When you're not doing some mass coverage, the chisel nib is just a little bit much, and trying to squeeze it into small spaces doesn't really help. But I printed this one at full size. You can see it's on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and that means the lines are nice and big, the shapes are bigger, so my marker can get into it. If you were to shrink this one down and try to print it out for, say, a card or something, you would not actually be able to color in it probably with the chisel nib, simply because there's too many small spaces. But you could certainly color it in something else, and this one is available on the website. It's called Coral Colony, and it is a fundraiser to save the corals, because, you know, our coral reefs are in trouble. I was watching a National Geographic special, and yikes for what is happening to our planet right now. So I thought doing a partial fundraiser for that one, a portion of the sales will go to charity to try to help the planet. There is a whole charitable page, by the way, on my website that has all the charitable giving things, because I do a lot of that for a lot of different causes that I care about. So with this one, I'm able to use the chisel nib of the marker and to get into these spaces. But some of them are really even a little bit small, so it was a bit challenging. I'm very experienced at negative drawing, and that helps. And maybe this would be an exercise, if you printed this large, that would help you to start learning to do some negative coloring, because it's like if you color the ones that are behind something, then that's trying to get the idea of negative coloring into your head, because a lot of people struggle with, how do I color the things that are not the thing? But if you start from the back and then make your way to the front, then you'll be okay. And I had a pen that I just did some line work with. That line work is going to be in the printable, because I realized I skipped some parts when I was doing this, and I scanned it all in and I was ready to roll. And then I looked at it when I was coloring and went, okay, I got to fix that and I got to fix that. So you'll get a better scan of the original. So fortunately, I was not coloring on the original. That would have been sad. But one thing that an image like this is super good for is to check out your different kinds of color combinations that you might want to use. You could try out colors in here instead of doing like little swatch blocks of colors. And check them out on a drawing like this that has a lot of complexity, and you can put a gajillion colors in here and it doesn't matter because, it's a bunch of coral and coral can be any color. Well, as it starts, dying, corals become bleached and white or really pale colors. So if you see coral like this, it's good and healthy. That's what we want our corals to look like. But you could try out all your different color combinations on this drawing and see them in context rather than in swatch blocks. And then put a piece of tracing paper over it and write down all the colors you used on each section. If you do it as you go, then you'll have a great reference for what kinds of color combinations you like. So that's another use for an image like this. And you can color it. You don't have to try coloring it with your chisel nibs if you don't want to. This was just an experiment for this particular image and this particular video. But, doesn't hurt to try practicing with it, because once you get to know what you can use your chisel nib for, that's just going to be more saving of your brush nibs. And, stuff's not expensive. Replacing those nibs is not going to be cheap. So it's going to be more helpful to make them last longer. And this kind of a thing, learning to use your chisel nib can definitely do that and save your bacon and your money and your art supply budget and everything else. So I had a blast just picking different colors because I don't know this Oahu set very well. So I was able to just pick one and see, okay, does it match the cap? When I made the hex chart, I realized a lot of them didn't match, but I don't know the set very well because usually when I start using a set over and over, I kind of intuitively know, okay, that cap's wrong, but it looks more like such and such a color. I used the Copic Acrea pen at the end to add bubbles, and bubbles are best when they're added in random order. So they're little groupings of them here and there with random sizes mixed in. So they look more natural rather than chicken pox all over the whole thing. The real-time footage for this drawing or this coloring is going to be in the Chisel Marker Techniques class. It's not narrated, but you can watch it slower because I know this sped by really fast because YouTube's being a pain. But you can get that for free if you take the Chisel Nib Marker Techniques class. And that's where you'll get to learn that urban sketch and all the techniques that come along with it for a nice tariff season discount. Because, we don't need to be spending more money on anything if we don't have to. Goodness gracious. So these two little guys are also available as printables, and you can go get them. The robots are already set up as bookmarks on a page, so you'll just color them, print them out, and trim them out, and you'll be done. And then you can see this lovely, beautiful coral in all of its full, gorgeous colors in that class. So check all that out. Links are all in the doobly-doo for the hex chart and everything. And I will see you again very soon with another video. Hope you have a great, great day. Go create something because that'll make you happy. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.